I am Claudine, 36 years old, and I built the technological foundation that turned our tiny startup into an $80 million company. My 18 patents were our competitive edge until our CTO Marcus discovered I had 0 stock options. His jealousy turned to opportunity, and the board pushed me out without a second thought. They never imagined I would transfer my patent rights and license them to every competitor in the industry. Let me tell you how I went from loyal innovator to their worst nightmare. If you have ever been undervalued at work, this story might resonate with you. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments, and if you have faced similar betrayal, hit that like and subscribe button to join our community of professionals who know their true worth. Growing up as the daughter of 2 scientists, innovation was in my blood. By the time I finished my dual engineering degrees at MIT, I had already filed my first 2 patents. Silicon Valley recruiters hounded me with offers, but I wanted to build something meaningful from the ground up. That is when I met Richard at the TechCrunch conference in San Francisco. Richard had this infectious enthusiasm about revolutionizing supply chain logistics through artificial intelligence. His vision captivated me, especially his emphasis on ethical technology development. We spoke for hours at the conference, sketching ideas on napkins and debating implementation strategies. By the end of the weekend, I had turned down a $300,000 offer from Google to join his 5-person startup for a fraction of the salary, but promises of significant equity down the line. Once we secure our Series A funding, we will formalize the equity distribution, Richard assured me. Your contributions will be properly recognized. Those early days were exhilarating and exhausting. Our office was a converted warehouse with mismatched furniture and temperamental air conditioning. I worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week, driven by the possibility of creating something revolutionary. My living room became an extension of our lab, with prototypes and circuit boards covering every surface. My roommate eventually moved out, complaining that living with me was like cohabiting with a mad scientist. Within 6 months, I had developed our core technological framework, an adaptive AI system that could optimize logistics chains in real time. This became the foundation for our first 5 patents, all listing me as the primary inventor with the company as the assignee. These innovations allowed us to secure our seed funding of $3 million, which Richard celebrated by finally giving us proper desks and chairs. As our reputation grew, so did our team. We expanded to 20 employees by the end of year 1, with me leading a small engineering department of 4 talented but junior developers. By year 2, we had secured a $10 million Series A round and had grown to 50 employees. My patent portfolio had expanded to 10 each one, strengthening our competitive moat in the industry. Richard would proudly present my innovations at investor meetings, always giving me credit and often having me explain the technical details that made our solutions unique. Claudine is our secret weapon, he would say, and I believed that my contributions were being recognized and would be rewarded appropriately when the time came. It was at the beginning of year 3, when we had grown to nearly 200 employees, that Marcus entered the picture. With our rapid expansion, the board insisted that we needed a seasoned chief technology officer with experience scaling technology companies. Richard reluctantly agreed, and Marcus was brought in from a successful exit at a competitor. From our first meeting, I sensed something off about Marcus. While he had the impressive resume and industry connections, there was a calculating quality to his interactions. He would ask detailed questions about my patents and implementation strategies, taking copious notes without sharing much of his own expertise. I am here to help amplify your innovations, not replace them, he assured me when I asked about my role under his leadership. You will still lead the innovation team. I will handle the scaling challenges and corporate strategy. Initially, our working relationship seemed productive. Marcus provided me with additional resources and expanded my team to 15 engineers. We continue to develop cutting-edge solutions, adding 7 more patents to our portfolio over the next year. Our product was gaining significant market traction, and rumors of acquisition offers circulated throughout the industry. My concerns about equity remained unaddressed, despite several casual inquiries to Richard. "We are still figuring out the cap table with the investors," he would say. "Your contribution is invaluable, Claudine. Trust me, we will make it right." And I did trust him. We had built this company together from nothing, and his vision had inspired me to give 4 years of my life to making it a reality. The thought that I might be sidelined never seriously crossed my mind, even as I noticed subtle changes in the company culture with Marcus's growing influence. Our all-hands meetings shifted from celebrating innovation to focusing on market capture and competitive positioning. Marcus began hiring executives from his previous companies, people who shared his more aggressive approach to business development. Gradually, the original team members who shared Richard's ethical vision were either marginalized or left. Still, our growth was undeniable. By the end of year 4, we were preparing for our Series B funding round with a projected valuation of $80 million. My patents were consistently cited by industry analysts as our primary competitive advantage. I had every reason to believe that the equity situation would finally be formalized with this new investment round. I could not have been more wrong. The preparation for our Series B funding round brought an intensity to the office I had never experienced before. Marcus hired external consultants to polish our pitch deck and technology presentations. What struck me as odd was how rarely I was included in these preparations, despite my patents being central to our value proposition. One Tuesday morning, I received a calendar invitation to a technology review with potential investors. The meeting was scheduled for the following day, leaving me minimal time to prepare. When I asked Marcus about the scope of the presentation, he was dismissively vague. "Just a standard overview of our core technology. Nothing you cannot handle in your sleep, Claudine." I stayed late that night, preparing detailed slides, explaining our patent portfolio and future innovation roadmap. When I arrived at the conference room the next morning, coffee in hand and ready to present, Marcus was already 15 minutes into a presentation using slides I had never seen before. "Ah, Claudine, perfect timing," he said without breaking stride. "I was just explaining to our guests how our patented technology differentiates us from competitors." I took a seat at the back of the room and watched in growing disbelief as Marcus presented my work as if it had been developed under his strategic direction. He referred to our engineering team and our development process without once mentioning my name or role. The potential investors nodded appreciatively, clearly impressed with what they were hearing. When the presentation concluded and the investors left, I confronted Marcus in the now empty conference room. "Those were my patents you were presenting, my innovations, my 4 years of work. Yet somehow my name never came up once." Marcus gathered his papers calmly, not meeting my eyes. "This is how the game is played at this level, Claudine. Investors do not care about individual contributors. They care about strong leadership and scalable processes. You should be grateful your work is being highlighted at all." Grateful, I struggled to keep my voice steady. I built the technological foundation of this entire company. Marcus finally looked up, his expression a mixture of pity and condescension. And that emotional attachment is exactly why I handle the investor relations. Technical people rarely understand the bigger picture. This is business, not a science fair, where everyone gets credit for their project. I left that meeting seething with anger and confusion. Later that day, I sought out Katie from our original team, now heading the product management department. Over lunch at a cafe far enough from the office to speak freely, I shared my concerns. "I am not surprised," Katie said, stirring her salad absently. "Marcus has been positioning himself as the technological visionary to the board for months. Richard seems completely under his influence now." "Richard promised me equity from day one," I said. 4 years later, I still have nothing in writing. Meanwhile, Marcus shows up and probably got a significant options package immediately." Katie looked at me with genuine concern. "Have you actually checked your official stock allocation? Everyone who was here before Series A should have some equity." That afternoon, I discreetly contacted someone in HR who had been friendly to me since the early days. After some hesitation, she confirmed that there was no record of any stock options or grants assigned to me, not a single share. The realization hit me like a physical blow. While I had been working nights and weekends building the technology that made the company valuable, operating on trust and verbal promises, others had secured their positions with formal contracts and equity agreements. That evening, I decided to approach Richard directly. I found him alone in his office, reviewing financial projections for the upcoming funding round. "Do you have a minute?" I asked from his doorway. "For my star engineer, always." His smile seemed genuine, which only confused me more. "I checked with HR today. I have no stock options, Richard. Not a single share after 4 years." Richard's expression shifted to one of surprise, mixed with what looked like guilt. "That cannot be right. I specifically instructed the legal team after our Series A to allocate options to all early employees." "Well, it did not happen, at least not for me." "I will look into it immediately," he promised. "This must be an administrative oversight. You are essential to this company, Claudine." I wanted to believe him, but the confidence I once had in his word had been severely damaged. As I turned to leave, he added, "Please do not mention this to anyone, especially not before our funding round closes. We need to present a unified front to investors." 2 weeks later, the Series B round closed successfully. The company was now valued at $80 million, and we held an extravagant celebration at an upscale hotel. Champagne flowed freely as Richard gave a speech thanking key contributors to our success. My name was mentioned in passing among a list of team members. Marcus, however, received special recognition for technological leadership that redefined the industry. During the party, Marcus approached me with a glass of champagne. "Quite a night, is it not? From startup to 80 million in just 4 years." "Yes, quite impressive," I replied neutrally. "Though some of us have very little to show for those 4 years." "What do you mean?" His expression was one of practiced concern. "I still have not received any equity despite being here since day one." Marcus's eyebrows shot up in apparent surprise. "No equity at all. That is unusual for someone in your position." "Unusual is one word for it. Let me ask you directly, what is your current option grant worth?" $0, I replied flatly. Something changed in his expression, a momentary calculation that I did not fully understand at the time. "That is unacceptable. Let me speak to Richard and the board about rectifying this situation immediately. We cannot have our top innovator feeling undervalued." His sudden concern should have warned me, but instead I felt a flood of relief that someone with influence was taking my situation seriously. "I would appreciate that. It has been weighing on me for a while now." "Consider it handled," Marcus said, clinking his glass against mine. "To fair recognition of contributions." I actually believed him. That was my second mistake. The first had been trusting Richard blindly for 4 years. The Monday following our funding celebration, I noticed a calendar invitation from Marcus for a project realignment meeting with my team. Curiously, I had not been consulted about any realignment, but I assumed it was related to our post-funding strategy. When I arrived at the meeting, Marcus was already there with my entire team. "Ah, Claudine, good. Now we can begin." He proceeded to announce a restructuring that would distribute my team members across different departments, each reporting to one of his recently hired directors. "But these are all the engineers working on our core innovation pipeline," I objected. "Splitting them up will fragment our research and development efforts." "This is about specialization and efficiency," Marcus countered smoothly. "Each team member will focus on a specific product area, creating more depth of expertise." My senior engineer Blake spoke up. "We have been working together as a unit for 2 years. Our collaboration is what makes the innovation process work." Marcus smiled thinly. "Change is always uncomfortable, but this decision has been approved by Richard and the board. The transition begins next week." After the team filed out, visibly discouraged, I stayed behind. "You should have discussed this with me first. These are my direct reports." "Were your direct reports," Marcus corrected. "In our new structure, you will lead advanced research initiatives working more independently. It is actually a promotion, giving you space to innovate without management burdens." It sounded plausible on the surface, but within 2 weeks, the reality became clear. My advanced research role came with no team, a reduced budget, and relocation to a small office, far from the main engineering department. The isolation was not just physical, but informational, as I found myself excluded from key strategic meetings that I had previously attended. One Wednesday afternoon, I tried to access our central code repository to review changes to the systems I had designed, only to discover that my administrative privileges had been downgraded. When I inquired about it to IT, they informed me that the directive had come directly from Marcus's office, citing security protocol updates. The following week, I was working late when my email chimed with a new message. It was from Marcus, to the board accidentally copied to an engineering distribution list that still included me. The email detailed concerns about the declining relevance of our initial patent portfolio and the need to pivot toward more market-responsive technologies. Attached was a proposal to reallocate innovation resources away from my research areas. I sat staring at my screen, the implications sinking in. Marcus was systematically dismantling my role and influence within the company I had helped build. But why? The answer came a few paragraphs later in his email. As we prepare for potential acquisition talks, we need to ensure our technical leadership is aligned with our strategic direction and properly incentivized through appropriate equity distribution. The pieces suddenly fit together. With the company's valuation soaring and acquisition rumors swirling, Marcus was positioning himself as the indispensable technical leader while marginalizing me, the person with no equity stake. If my contributions were minimized before an acquisition, there would be no pressure to include me in the financial windfall. I forwarded the email to my personal account, then deleted it from the company server. Evidence might be useful later, and I was beginning to think in terms of protection rather than loyalty. The next day, I requested a meeting with Richard, determined to understand if he was aware of or complicit in these maneuvers. His assistant informed me that his schedule was full for the next 2 weeks, but offered a 15-minute slot the following Monday. When Monday arrived, I found Richard distracted and hurried, checking his phone repeatedly during our brief meeting. I am concerned about the direction of our technology development, I began. Marcus seems to be systematically sidelining the innovations that built this company. Richard sighed, finally putting down his phone. Marcus is implementing necessary changes to position us for the next growth phase. Sometimes original technologies need to evolve or be replaced. My patents are the reason we have a competitive advantage at all. They are cited in every industry analysis. We're cited, Richard corrected. The technology landscape is changing rapidly. Marcus has convinced the board that we need to pivot toward more scalable solutions. The casual dismissal of my contributions felt like a physical blow. And what about my equity situation? You said you would look into it. Richard shifted uncomfortably. The board feels that equity distribution needs to align with our forward strategy, not past contributions. Given the restructuring of our technical priorities. He trailed off, but the message was clear. Not only was I not going to receive the equity I had been promised for years of work, but my very role in the company's success was being actively erased. That night, I barely slept, my mind racing through options and scenarios. The next morning, I called Sandra, a law school friend who had specializing in intellectual property rights. I need to understand my legal position, I explained after outlining my situation. I have 18 patents assigned to the company, but I am being systematically pushed out with no equity compensation. What does your employment contract say about intellectual property? Sandra asked. Standard assignment of inventions created during employment, I replied. But here is the interesting part. I developed the conceptual framework for 3 of my most recent patents on my own time, though they relate to company products. That could be significant, Sandra said. And have you signed any specific patent assignment agreements for each invention? I paused, thinking back through the paperwork I had signed over the years. For the first 10 or 12 patents, yes. But for the most recent ones, I do not recall signing formal assignments. The company patent lawyers handled the filings, and I was listed as inventor. But with our rapid growth, the process became less structured. This might give you some leverage, Sandra advised. Patent rights initially belong to the inventor unless specifically assigned. Without formal assignment, documents for those recent patents, you might still hold some rights. I would need to review everything carefully. We agreed to meet that weekend to go through all my documentation. In the meantime, I began discreetly researching our company's technical dependencies. Which products relied most heavily on my patented innovations? Which competitors might be interested in licensing similar technology? What would the company's position be if they suddenly had to compete with their own foundational technology? The more I researched, the clearer the picture became. Nearly 80% of our revenue came from products directly enabled by my patents. Our competitive advantage, so proudly touted in investor presentations, was built almost entirely on innovations I had created. Without those patents, the company would be just another logistics software provider in a crowded market. A growing sense of resolve replaced my initial shock and hurt. If Marcus and Richard thought they could simply discard me after using my brain for 4 years, they were about to learn an expensive lesson about the value of intellectual property and basic human decency. The calendar notification appeared without warning on Friday at 2:30 in the afternoon. Personnel discussion, 3 p.m. Conference Room B. The meeting organizer was Janet from Human Resources with Marcus as a required attendee. My stomach tightened. As I read the invitation, a cold certainty settling over me. This was it. I spent the next 30 minutes backing up personal files and photos from my computer, clearing out my desk drawers as discreetly as possible, and sending a quick text to Sandra. I think it is happening now. We'll call you after. At precisely 3 p.m., I walked into Conference Room B with my head held high. Janet sat stiffly at the table, a folder in front of her. Marcus stood by the window looking out at the campus grounds, turning only when I entered. Claudine, please have a seat, Janet said, her voice professionally neutral. I remained standing. I prefer to stand for this conversation. Marcus cleared his throat. We will not take much of your time. The company has decided to move in a different strategic direction with our technical leadership. Unfortunately, your position has been eliminated effective immediately. Despite expecting it, the words still felt like a punch to the gut. 4 years of dedication dismissed in a single sterile sentence. And the real reason, I asked, looking directly at Marcus? Janet jumped in quickly. This is strictly a business decision based on organizational needs and technical direction. Not because I discovered I have zero equity after 4 years of building this company from nothing. Not because I found out about your systematic campaign to minimize my contributions before a potential acquisition. I kept my voice steady, watching Marcus for a reaction. His expression remained impassive. Your performance has become increasingly misaligned with company objectives. Your resistance to necessary changes has created friction within the engineering department. My resistance to having my work appropriated and my team dismantled, you mean? Janet slid a document across the table. We are prepared to offer 2 weeks severance pay in exchange for a standard separation agreement, including non-disclosure and non-compete clauses. I glanced at the insulting document without touching it. 2 weeks. For 4 years and 18 patents that built this company. The intellectual property you developed belongs to the company as per your employment agreement, Marcus stated flatly. The severance is generous considering the circumstances. And what circumstances would those be? We could discuss your unauthorized access of confidential communications and forwarding company documents to personal accounts, he said, his tone hardening. But we prefer an amicable separation. So they had tracked my forwarding that email. Of course they had. I will need to review any agreement with my attorney before signing, I said, finally taking the document. We will need your decision by Monday, Janet replied. Your company laptop badge and any other company property should be left with security on your way out. Someone will pack your personal items and have them sent to your home address. I will escort you to your office to collect your things, Marcus added, moving toward the door. The humiliation of being watched while gathering my belongings was almost worse than the termination itself. As I placed my family photos and the few personal items I had not already cleared into a cardboard box provided by security, Marcus stood in the doorway, checking his watch repeatedly. "Was it worth it?" I asked him quietly. "Pushing out the person who created the technology your career now depends on." For a moment, his mask slipped. In this industry, it is not about who creates the technology, but who controls it. You were naive to think loyalty would be rewarded without the proper legal protections. At least he was honest in that final moment. Security walked me to my car, taking my badge and laptop before I drove away. As soon as I pulled out of the parking lot, the tears I had been holding back began to flow freely. 4 years of my life, countless nights and weekends innovations, I was genuinely proud of, all reduced to a humiliating escort out of the building and a 2-week severance offer. I spent the weekend alternating between crushing despair and simmering rage. Friends called to check on me after I posted a vague update about unexpected career changes on social media, but I could not bring myself to explain the full situation yet. The betrayal felt too raw, too personal. Monday morning, I woke to an email from the company's legal department with an updated separation agreement attached. The new version included expanded non-compete clauses, explicit confirmation of patent assignments, and language waiving any claims to equity or additional compensation. The tone was aggressive, clearly designed to intimidate me into signing away any remaining leverage I might have. That email was the turning point. Something shifted inside me, a clarity emerging from the emotional fog of the weekend. This was not just about losing a job or being denied promised equity. This was about powerful people believing they could exploit someone's work and passion, then discard them without consequences. I called Sandra immediately. "I need to meet with you today. And I need a referral to the best patent attorney you know." By that afternoon, I was sitting in the office of Gerald Feynman, one of the top intellectual property attorneys in Silicon Valley. Sandra had joined us along with a junior associate taking detailed notes. Based on my initial review, Gerald said after examining the documents I had brought, the company has clear ownership of the first 12 patents through proper assignment documentation. However, for the 6 most recent patents, the situation is more complex. You signed invention disclosure forms, but not formal assignment documents. "What does that mean practically?" I asked. "It means you technically still retain certain rights as the inventor. While the company has an implied license to use the technology based on the work-for-hire doctrine, you may have the ability to license these patents to others, depending on specific circumstances of their development and your employment agreement. And if the company challenges this, litigation would be costly and time-consuming for both parties. The question becomes one of leverage and negotiation rather than absolute legal positions. For the first time since Friday, I felt a glimmer of hope. So I have options. "You have leverage," Gerald corrected. "The question is how best to use it." Over the next 4 hours, we developed a strategic plan that would change the course of my career and, as it turned out, an entire industry. The next morning, I established Claudine Innovation Labs, LLC, with Gerald's help. By afternoon, I had drafted licensing terms for my 6 contested patents, focusing on fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory conditions that would be difficult to challenge legally. Meanwhile, the company's communications grew increasingly urgent. Voice messages from Marcus, emails from legal, even a text from Richard asking me to be reasonable and protect your professional reputation. I maintained strategic silence, following Gerald's advice to let their anxiety build. On Wednesday, I reached out to 3 of our main competitors with a simple message: "I am Claudine Mitchell, inventor, on patents covering adaptive AI logistics optimization systems currently used by InnoChain Solutions. I believe you may be interested in discussing licensing opportunities for these technologies." The response was immediate. Within hours, all 3 companies had scheduled meetings with me and their respective legal teams. The first meeting with Logitech Systems was set for Thursday morning. "We have been trying to work around these patents for 2 years," admitted Carlos, Logitech's CTO, during our meeting. The architecture you designed is simply the most efficient approach to real-time supply chain optimization. And now, you can license it directly from the inventor I explained, outlining my proposed terms, including the requirement that products using these innovations acknowledge the patent license in their user interface. Carlos smiled. The acknowledgement would actually be a selling point for us. Having your name associated with our products would signal technical superiority to customers familiar with the technology. We reached an agreement in principle by the end of the meeting. The financial terms were generous, but more importantly, they included prominent attribution requirements. My name would appear in the product interfaces, technical documentation, and marketing materials, ensuring that my contribution to the field could never again be erased or minimized. Similar meetings with the other two competitors yielded comparable results. By Friday afternoon, 1 week after my termination, I had preliminary agreements with 3 major players in the industry, all eager to implement the technologies I had developed. The first indication that the company had discovered what was happening came in the form of a cease and desist letter delivered to my apartment by courier on Saturday morning. The legal language was aggressive, threatening immediate litigation for theft of intellectual property and violation of confidentiality agreements. I forwarded the letter to Gerald, who responded with characteristic calm. "This is bluster. They know their position on the unassigned patents is weak, or they would have filed for an immediate injunction rather than sending threatening letters." On Monday morning, the first technical blogs began reporting on the unusual licensing agreements I had established with multiple industry players. Patent innovator goes independent licenses key technology to multiple competitors, read one headline. Industry shakeup as AI logistics patents find new licensees, proclaimed another. By Tuesday, the story had reached mainstream tech news. My phone rang constantly with reporters seeking comments, industry analysts wanting background information, and even recruiters offering positions at companies impressed by my strategic maneuvering. The most satisfying call came Tuesday evening from Richard himself, his voice a mixture of anger and desperate negotiation. "What are you doing, Claudine? You are undermining the entire company." "I am licensing my intellectual property on fair and reasonable terms," I replied calmly. "Something I would have been happy to do exclusively with our company had I been treated with basic respect and compensated fairly for my contributions." The board is furious. They are talking about extensive litigation, criminal charges, blacklisting you in the industry. The board might want to consider how public litigation would look, Richard. A company valued at $80 million trying to crush the female engineer who created their core technology after denying her any equity compensation for 4 years of work. In the current climate of tech diversity initiatives that might not play well in the press or with your customers. Silence stretched over the line before Richard spoke again, his voice notably subdued. "What would it take to resolve this? We could discuss a generous equity package retroactively applied a consulting position." "That opportunity existed for 4 years and was repeatedly ignored," I replied. "Now the market will determine the value of my innovations with proper attribution that cannot be erased by corporate politics. I wish you luck competing in that market." I ended the call feeling a profound sense of justice. Not revenge, but simply the balancing of scales that had been unfairly tilted against me for too long. The first products featuring my licensed patents launched the following week. True to our agreements, each one prominently displayed patent technology licensed from Claudine Mitchell in their interfaces. Some even made my involvement a central part of their marketing, highlighting the industry-leading innovations of recognized AI pioneer Claudine Mitchell in their promotional materials. As Gerald had predicted, the company did not pursue litigation. The combination of questionable legal standing on the unassigned patents and the potential public relations disaster made formal legal action too risky. Instead, they attempted to rapidly develop workarounds for the technologies they could no longer exclusively claim. These efforts proved both expensive and largely unsuccessful. The architectural approaches I had developed were foundational, not easily replaced without significant performance degradation. Customers began noticing the difference, and sales reports leaked to industry analysts showed a concerning trend of client defections to competitors now licensing my patents. The company stock, which had been riding high after the Series B funding, dropped 30% in 2 weeks as market analysts adjusted their projections based on the new competitive landscape. Investor questions about the management decisions that had led to this situation grew increasingly pointed. 3 weeks after my termination, during an emergency board meeting I learned about through industry contacts, Marcus was removed as CTO. The official announcement cited strategic differences as the reason for his departure, but the timing made the true cause obvious to everyone in the industry. The poetic justice of the situation was not lost on me, but by then I had moved beyond the need for revenge. I was building something new on my own terms, with my contributions properly recognized and valued. The technology media could not get enough of the story. Articles analyzing the patent licensing coup appeared daily, with headlines like "How One Engineer Changed the Logistics Technology Landscape" and "David versus Luco, Goliath the Engineer Who Outmaneuvered a Tech Giant." Industry analysts published detailed reports on the shifting competitive dynamics, with most concluding that the company's previously dominant position was severely compromised. The company attempted to control the narrative with a press release, emphasizing their robust pipeline of next-generation technologies and dismissing the licensed patents as early iterations that were already being phased out. The market remained unconvinced, with their stock continuing its downward trend. I received LinkedIn connection requests from hundreds of engineers and technology professionals, many including personal messages of support and similar stories of undervalued contributions. Women in tech groups invited me to speak about intellectual property rights and equitable recognition in the industry. A surprising number of venture capitalists reached out to discuss potential funding for whatever I might build next. 6 weeks after my termination, industry reports indicated the company had missed its quarterly targets for the first time since launch. Customer acquisition had slowed dramatically, while churn had increased as clients moved to competitors now featuring my licensed technologies. The board faced difficult questions from major investors about the series of decisions that had led to this situation. Richard reached out again, this time with a formal offer. The company would hire me back as Chief Innovation Officer with significant equity backdated to my original start date, plus a substantial signing bonus. The only condition was exclusive licensing of my patents back to them. I considered the offer briefly, more out of curiosity than genuine interest. Why would I return to a company that so clearly demonstrated how it values my contributions? I asked Richard during our call. We made a terrible mistake, he admitted. The board was misled about your role and the centrality of your innovations to our success. By Marcus, you mean? Primarily, yes, but we all bear responsibility for not recognizing and properly compensating your contributions. And now that there are consequences, suddenly my contributions matter again. Richard sighed. I know how it looks. But we built something special together once. We could do it again, this time with proper recognition and compensation from the start. I appreciate the offer, I said, genuinely touched by what seemed like sincere regret. But I will have to decline. I am building something new now. Something that will have proper values and recognition baked in from the beginning. After declining their offer, I made a counter-offer. I would provide them a non-exclusive license to my patents on the same terms as their competitors, including the attribution requirements. The board rejected it, apparently unwilling to publicly acknowledge that they had lost control of their own core technology. Without access to my patents, the company was forced to undertake a complete redesign of their product line. This led to significant delays in their development roadmap and complaints from customers about postponed feature releases. Meanwhile, competitors licensing my technology continued to advance, capturing market share with each passing week. 3 months after my termination, Marcus landed a new position at a smaller competitor, though notably with a less prestigious title than CTO. Industry rumors suggested he had been turned down by several larger companies, his reputation tarnished by the public failure at his previous role. The narrative that had emerged, fairly or not, was of an executive who had pushed out a key innovator for personal gain, only to destroy significant shareholder value in the process. The company announced a restructuring, laying off 15% of staff, including several executives hired during Marcus's tenure. Their stock had stabilized, but at just over half its previous value. Acquisition talks, which had been progressing before my departure, were reportedly shelved indefinitely as potential buyers reassessed the company's technological assets and competitive position. By this point, my patent licensing business was generating substantial passive income, giving me the freedom to explore new research directions without immediate financial pressure. I had assembled a small team of brilliant engineers who shared my vision for ethical technology development and equitable recognition of contributions. Richard sent a final email that contained no business proposals, just a simple personal apology. I failed to protect someone who trusted me and contributed enormously to what we built. That will remain one of my deepest professional regrets. Whatever you build next will be extraordinary, and the people who work with you will be fortunate to have a leader who understands the true value of innovation and loyalty. I appreciated his words, even as I recognized that they came too late to repair the damage done. Some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt, no matter how sincere the apology. The industry continued to evolve, with my licensed technologies becoming standard features in logistics optimization systems. My name became associated with a specific architectural approach to AI-assisted supply chain management, something that would have been unlikely had I remained an anonymous company employee, no matter how valued. The irony was not lost on me that being pushed out of the company had ultimately given me more recognition, financial security, and professional satisfaction than I likely would have achieved by staying. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us professionally lead to the best possible outcomes, though the path between the two is rarely clear when we are in the midst of the struggle. 6 months after that fateful Friday when I was escorted from the building, my consulting company Claudine Innovation Labs had grown to a team of 12 brilliant engineers and researchers. We operated on a fundamentally different model than most tech companies, with transparent equity distribution from day one and clear attribution of all innovations in our patent filings. The passive income from my patent licensing agreements had provided the financial foundation to build something meaningful without the pressure of immediate profitability. I had turned down acquisition offers and venture capital funding that might have compromised our values in favor of sustainable independent growth. One sunny Tuesday afternoon, I met Katie for coffee at the same cafe where she had warned me about office politics all those months ago. She had recently left the company as well, joining a startup with a more ethical approach to technology development. "You look happy," she observed, studying my face across the table. "Happier than I ever saw you at the company, even in the good early days." "I am," I admitted. "Not just because things worked out financially, but because I finally feel like my work is being recognized properly. Not just my work, actually, but me as a whole person." "The industry certainly knows who you are now." Katie laughed. "I was at a conference last week where your licensing strategy was presented as a case study in a session on intellectual property rights. The room was packed." "That still feels surreal," I admitted. "But what I am most proud of is building a company where no one will ever have to fight for the recognition they deserve. Our operating agreement literally requires attribution of innovations to specific team members in all public materials." "You turned a painful experience into positive change," Katie said. "That is rare." The healing had not happened overnight. For weeks after my termination, I had struggled with feelings of betrayal and self-doubt. Had I been naive to trust verbal promises? Should I have been more aggressive in demanding equity documentation from the beginning? The questions had circled in my mind, creating a cycle of second-guessing that was difficult to break. What helped most was connecting with a community of women in technology who had faced similar challenges. Through industry groups and informal meetups, I found others who understood the unique struggles of being undervalued and overlooked despite significant contributions. Their stories helped me contextualize my experience as part of a broader pattern rather than a personal failure. I also found unexpected healing in mentoring younger engineers, particularly women and people from underrepresented groups in technology. Sharing the lessons I had learned the hard way created meaning from my difficult experience. Each time I advised someone to get equity promises in writing or help them understand their intellectual property rights, I felt I was creating positive ripples from what had initially seemed like only a negative situation. The most profound change was in how I viewed professional relationships and corporate loyalty. I had entered the company with an idealistic belief in shared vision and mutual respect, only to discover the harsh reality that business decisions often prioritize power and control over fairness and contribution. This awakening had been painful, but ultimately valuable, giving me a more nuanced understanding of how to protect my interests while still collaborating effectively. "Do you regret not fighting harder for equity earlier?" Katie asked, voicing the question I had asked myself countless times. "I have made peace with it," I replied after a thoughtful pause. Yes, I should have been more assertive about formalizing those promises, but the person I was then trusted people and believed in the vision more than the paperwork. I cannot fault my younger self for that idealism, even if it was ultimately misplaced. And Marcus Richard, do you still harbor resentment toward them? Less than you might expect, I said honestly. Marcus was playing a game I did not even know I was in, using rules I had not been taught. Richard was weak when he should have been strong, choosing the path of least resistance over what he knew was right. I see them now as flawed humans making poor choices, not villains in my personal story. This perspective had not come easily or quickly. The initial anger and hurt had been overwhelming at times, consuming my thoughts and energy. Gradually, as I built something new and valuable, those feelings had receded, replaced by a sense of gratitude for the difficult lessons and unexpected opportunities that had emerged from the experience. My phone chimed with a notification reminding me of an afternoon meeting with potential collaborators on a new research initiative. As Katie and I said our goodbyes, she hugged me tightly. "For what it is worth, I always knew you were the real genius behind our technology. I am glad the rest of the world knows it now, too." As I walked to my car, I reflected on the strange path that had led me here. Being pushed out of the company I had helped build had felt like the end of something important at the time. In reality, it had been the beginning of something far more valuable, not just professionally but personally. The greatest lesson I had learned was not about patents or equity or corporate politics, though those were certainly important. It was about owning your value and contributions in a world that often benefits from keeping them hidden or uncompensated. It was about finding the courage to stand up for yourself when others will not. And perhaps most importantly, it was about building systems and communities that make such courage less necessary for those who come after you. I still believe in innovation and collaboration and the power of technology to solve important problems. I simply believe more strongly in doing so on terms that recognize and reward everyone's contributions fairly with the proper protections and documentation from day one. If my story resonates with you, I would love to hear your experiences in the comments. Have you ever had your contributions undervalued or unrecognized? How did you respond? Remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories about navigating professional challenges and standing up for your worth. Share this with someone who might need to hear that sometimes being pushed out of where you thought you belonged is the push you need to find where you truly shine. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember your contributions have value whether others recognize it or not.